In the glittering, clamorous world of clinking chips and flashing lights, there is an iron law: the house always wins. This maxim is etched into the green felt of every card table, reflected in the dazzling lights of every slot machine, and echoes in the sighs of every gambler walking away with empty pockets. The casino's entire business model is built upon a precisely calculated mathematical advantage, known as the house edge or rake. Like an invisible tax collector, it silently schemes a portion from every bet, ensuring that in the long run, money flows in one direction, from the players' pockets into the casino's vault. However, within this seemingly impenetrable fortress, are there cracks to be exploited? Is there a domain where intelligence, discipline, and strategy can triumph over pure probability? The answer is yes, but this is no yellow brick road to easy riches. It is a thorny path demanding supreme intellect, an iron will, and profound understanding. The average tourist walks into a casino seeking entertainment, an adrenaline rush. They pay for hope and fleeting excitement with their money, willingly covering the cost of the house edge for the experience. But there is a small subset of people who view the casino in a completely different light. To them, it is not a place of amusement, but a complex financial market, filled with mispriced assets and exploitable inefficiencies. They are not gamblers, they are advantage players. They do not rely on ethereal luck, but on mathematics, psychology, and strict self-control. They know that confronting the casino head-on in the vast majority of its games is a fool's errand, as the rules themselves guarantee a long-term loss for the player. Therefore, they turn their focus to 4 unique areas within the casino ecosystem where the scales can be tipped in the player's favor through skill and strategy. These 4 things are the only beatable games in the casino: poker, sports betting, blackjack, and progressive slot machines. The first beatable game is poker, perhaps the most famous game of skill in the casino. What makes poker unique is that you are not playing against the house. You are competing against other players. The casino's role is more akin to that of a venue provider and referee, collecting a small percentage of each pot, known as the rake or session fee, as their guaranteed source of profit. Your objective is not to beat the casino, but to beat the people sitting across from you. This transforms the game from a contest of pure probability into a complex war of psychology, strategy, mathematical calculation, and human insight. A successful poker player must be a polymath. They need to be a quasi-mathematician, able to rapidly calculate pot odds, implied odds, and their probability of winning to determine if calling, raising, or folding has a positive expected value, plus EV. They must understand that poker is a long-term game of decisions. The outcome of a single hand is irrelevant. What matters is consistently making the mathematically optimal choice over countless hands, even if it leads to short-term losses. At the same time, they must be a keen psychologist. Information is everywhere at the table. An opponent's betting patterns, body language, conversation, and even breathing rhythm can reveal clues about the strength of their hand. While interpreting these tells, the poker player must also manage their own image, knowing how to disguise their intentions and tell a false story with their actions to induce mistakes from their opponents. You can play as a tight, weak player, only playing the best starting hands to make opponents fear your big bets. Or you can play as a loose, aggressive player, constantly applying pressure to make them crumble under uncertainty. The depth and complexity of this psychological battle far exceed the cards themselves. More importantly, poker is the ultimate test of discipline and emotional control. A state known as tilt is the nightmare of countless poker players. When a string of bad luck or a single painful loss causes emotions to spiral, players begin making irrational, retaliatory decisions, abandoning all strategy and mathematical principles, ultimately losing a massive amount of chips in a short time. Successful players know how to recognize and control this emotion. They know when to leave the table and how to treat every loss as a normal fluctuation in the long-term game, not a personal vendetta. They possess an iron will, capable of withstanding immense psychological pressure and bankroll swings, consistently executing their strategy without deviation. Therefore, to beat poker is, in effect, to beat the weaknesses of human nature: greed, fear, wishful thinking, and impatience. You profit from players weaker than you through superior skill, deeper insight, and a stronger mindset, while the casino simply collects its fee, happy to facilitate this transfer of wealth between players. The second area that can be beaten is sports betting. Similar to poker, the essence of sports betting lies not in competing against an omniscient opponent, the bookmaker, but in finding inefficiencies in the market, the odds set by the bookmakers. Bookmakers are not infallible prophets. The odds they set are not merely a probabilistic prediction of a game's outcome. More importantly, they are designed to balance the betting volume. Their ideal scenario is one where, regardless of the result, they can collect a guaranteed commission from the total amount wagered, known as the vigorish or juice. For example, in a perfectly matched game, the odds on both sides might be minus 110, meaning you must bet $110 to win $100. That extra $10 is the bookmaker's profit. The goal of a sharp sports bettor, also known as a handicapper, is to find games that have been mispriced by the bookmaker or the market. By building complex mathematical models and incorporating vast amounts of historical data, team form, injury reports, weather conditions, and even locker room dynamics, they calculate the true probability of a game's outcome. When they find that their calculated probability of winning is higher than the implied probability of the odds, a betting opportunity with positive expected value, plus EV, arises. For instance, if a model calculates a team has a 60% chance of winning, but the bookmaker's odds convert to an implied probability of only 50%, then betting on that team is a profitable long-term decision. This requires an immense investment of time and effort in research and analysis, rivaling that of any financial analyst. They are not betting on which team will win. They are investing in an undervalued probability. Furthermore, the sports betting market itself is rife with psychological warfare. The majority of casual bettors, known as the public or squares, tend to bet on well-known, popular teams or teams coming off a big win. This irrational betting bias can distort the odds, causing the prices on these popular teams to be artificially low while the odds on their opponents become correspondingly higher. Sharp players often go against the grain, a practice known as fading the public, by specifically betting on teams that are unpopular with the public because the odds for these teams often contain extra value. They leverage public bias and emotional betting to create an edge for themselves. As with poker, bankroll management is paramount in sports betting. Because of the inherent uncertainty in sporting events, even the top professional bettors typically have a win rate of only around 55%. This means they will endure numerous losses and long losing streaks. Without a strict bankroll management strategy, such as betting only 1% to 2% of one's total bankroll on any single game, the so-called unit system, a single bad run could bankrupt a player. Discipline is the line that separates professional players from average gamblers. Professionals understand and accept that losing is part of the game. They never go on tilt after a loss or try to chase their losses by increasing their bet size, because they know that every betting decision must be independent and based on value, not on emotion. With an almost cold-blooded rationality, they execute their strategy day after day, like patient hunters waiting for the moment the market reveals a flaw. The third and most legendary, beatable game is Blackjack. At first glance, Blackjack is a simple game. The player's goal is to get their hand's point value as close to 21 as possible without exceeding it, and in doing so, beat the dealer. The casino has a slight but consistent mathematical edge in this game, primarily because the player must act first. If the player busts, they lose immediately, even if the dealer subsequently busts as well. However, Blackjack has a fatal flaw. It is not a game of independent probabilistic events. Unlike roulette, where the outcome of each spin is unrelated to the last, Blackjack is dealt from a finite shoe of one or more decks of cards. This means the cards that have already been dealt affect the composition of the cards remaining in the shoe. This simple physical fact opens the door for a strategy known as card counting. The basic principle of card counting is that when the remaining shoe is rich in high cards, tens, jacks, queens, kings, aces, the advantage shifts to the player. Conversely, when the shoe is rich in low cards, twos, threes, fours, fives, SXS, the advantage shifts to the dealer. This is because a higher concentration of high cards increases the player's chances of getting a blackjack, an ace, and a 10-point card, which typically pays 3-2, better than the 1-1 payout for a normal win. A surplus of high cards also increases the probability that the dealer will bust when they have a stiff hand, such as 12 through 16. Card counters use a simple counting system, such as the famous high-low system, to track the cards. They assign a value of +1 to low cards, -1 to high cards, and 0 to neutral cards, 7s, 8s, 9s. They maintain a running count, in their head as the cards are dealt. When the running count is positive and rising, it indicates that the shoe has a higher proportion of high cards, and the player has the advantage. To more accurately gauge the size of their advantage, they will divide the running count by the approximate number of decks remaining in the shoe to get a true count. The higher the true count, the greater the player's edge. Armed with this information, card counters exploit their advantage in two ways. The first and most critical way is by varying their bet size. When the true count is negative or neutral, they bet the table minimum to minimize their losses when the odds are against them. But when the true count becomes significantly positive, indicating they have the edge, they will decisively increase their bet by several or even dozens of times. This strategy of sizing bets according to the advantage, known as a bet spread, is the core of how a card counter generates long-term profit. Second, they will deviate from basic strategy based on the true count. Basic strategy is a chart of mathematically optimal decisions for every possible player hand against every dealer up card, derived from billions of computer simulations. For example, basic strategy typically dictates that a player should hit a 16 against a dealer's 10. However, if a card counter knows the true count is very high, meaning the shoe is flooded with high cards, the risk of busting by hitting increases dramatically. In this situation, the optimal decision becomes to stand. These subtle deviations from basic strategy further increase the player's edge. However, casinos are not oblivious to this. They employ sophisticated surveillance systems and experienced pit bosses whose job includes identifying these advantage players. A card counter's betting pattern is their most easily exposed trait, betting small for long periods, then suddenly placing large bets. This behavior is as conspicuous to casino surveillance as a firefly in the night. Once a player is suspected of counting, the casino will begin to apply heat. Casino staff will appear more frequently at their table, watching their every move, or a chatty dealer might be sent in to disrupt their concentration. If the player's winning pattern continues, the casino will take more direct measures. As you described, this process is often gradual. The first step, a pit boss or floor supervisor will politely approach you and say quietly but firmly, "Hey, sorry, we're going to have to flat bet you," which means you can no longer change your bet increment size. For a card counter, this statement is tantamount to being disarmed. All of card counting's profit comes from betting big with an edge and small without one. Once restricted to a flat bet, even with the minuscule edge gained from deviating from basic strategy, it's not nearly enough to overcome the house edge and normal variance. Your ability to win is effectively stripped away. They let you keep playing because they know that at a blackjack game where you can't vary your bets, you will eventually lose. Then, if you are a highly skilled and stubborn player who manages to win on short-term luck even with a flat bet, or if the casino simply doesn't want to waste any more time on you, they will take the final step. The manager will reappear, this time with a less friendly tone, and ban you from playing blackjack altogether. They might say, "Sir, we'd be happy to have you play any other game in our casino, roulette, craps, anything you want, but your blackjack days are over here." In extreme cases, if the player is defiant or is repeatedly identified at multiple casinos, they may be trespassed, meaning they are legally barred from setting foot on the casino property and face arrest if they return. Consequently, the modern card counter must not only be a mathematician but also an excellent actor, using various camouflage techniques to hide their true intentions, such as pretending to be drunk, chatting with companions, or deliberately making incorrect plays on inconsequential hands, all to extend the time they can play before being discovered. It is a timeless cat-and-mouse game of intellect and psychological warfare. Finally, the fourth area where you can beat the casino comes from one of the most unexpected places, the slot machines. Traditionally, slot machines are the games with the highest house edge and require zero skill. Every machine is controlled by a random number generator, RNG, and its return to player, RTP, is precisely set below 100%, typically between 85% and 95%. This means that in the long run, for every dollar a player wagers, they are destined to lose 5 to 15 cents. However, a special type of slot machine, the progressive jackpot slot, can break this rule under specific conditions. Progressive jackpot slots operate just as you described. They start with a base jackpot, known as a seed amount, say $75,000. For every wager made by a player, the casino diverts a tiny percentage, usually 1% to 5%, into this public, accumulating jackpot. As thousands of players spin the reels without hitting the grand prize, the jackpot grows like a snowball, climbing higher and higher, potentially reaching $500,000 or even millions of dollars. The key is that this constantly growing jackpot is continuously increasing the overall RTP of the slot machine. The machine's base game RTP is fixed and below 100%, but the value of the jackpot is a variable. As the jackpot amount climbs, the expected value of each spin increases in tandem. At a certain critical point, when the jackpot is high enough, the value it adds to the overall RTP will be sufficient to overcome the base game's house edge and push the total RTP above 100%. At this moment, the slot machine enters a player favorable or positive expected value, plus EV, state. From this point on, theoretically, every press of the button becomes profitable. This doesn't mean you will win on every spin. On the contrary, you will still lose the wager on the vast majority of your spins. But because of the existence of that enormous jackpot that can cover all losses, from a mathematical expectation perspective, the long-term value of each spin is positive. So, if you wait until the jackpot reaches a calculated threshold and then begin to play the machine continuously, you will probabilistically come out ahead and realize that expected value. This strategy has given rise to a group of people known as slot advantage players, or jackpot hunters. Their work is not gambling, but information gathering and waiting for opportunities. They systematically monitor all the progressive jackpot slots in a given region, logging the jackpot amount of each machine. By studying the machine's pay tables and historical data, they estimate the break-even point at which a machine enters a plus EV state. Once they discover a machine whose jackpot has surpassed this critical point, they move in quickly, sit down, and begin playing non-stop until the jackpot is hit. This may sound like a simple game of waiting for the right moment, but the execution is incredibly difficult. First, the variance is enormous. A slot machine's plus EV state is entirely propped up by the extremely low probability jackpot hit. You might have to invest tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, making hundreds of thousands of spins before a jackpot ever lands. During this time, your bankroll will experience violent swings, and you will be consistently losing money most of the time. This requires players to have an extremely large bankroll and the ability to withstand immense financial and psychological pressure. Second, it is a highly competitive game. You are not the only one who knows this secret. When a high-value progressive jackpot appears, it often attracts a team of advantage players. They will occupy the machine and those surrounding it, playing in shifts to ensure the plus EV opportunity doesn't fall into the hands of an outsider. They work together, pooling funds and information, to combat the massive variance and long waits with collective strength. The casinos are not entirely ignorant of this either. While they don't combat slot APs as directly as they do card counters, since these players are still contributing a huge volume of wagers to the casino, they do take measures to mitigate their risk, such as lowering the seed amount of the jackpots or simply taking a machine out of service for maintenance if a jackpot gets too high. Therefore, beating progressive slot machines is less a battle against the machine and more a competition of patience, capital, information, and execution. It requires the player to act like a shrewd investor, accurately identifying an asset whose value has been underestimated by the market, the plus EV jackpot, and then investing enough capital and time to wait for that value to be realized.